Welcome back, drowsy listener. Tonight, you're going to slip out of this century entirely. You're going to leave behind the glow of screens and the hum of traffic, and you're going to wake up in a small medieval village, in a small stone cottage, in a life that belonged to one of the most quietly important women of the entire Middle Ages. Tonight, you are a medieval midwife, and I'll tell you now, almost everything you think you know about her is wrong. She wasn't feared, she wasn't hunted, she wasn't lurking at the edge of the village with a cauldron. She was trusted with things no one else in her world was trusted with. Not the priest, not the lord, not the physician. We'll get to all of it, slowly, softly, the way everything moves tonight. Before you settle in, if these long, quiet journeys into the past help you rest, tap subscribe so you never lose your way back here, and leave a comment with the oldest story in your family. Maybe a great-grandmother who delivered babies in her village, a birth in a farmhouse, a name passed down through 5 generations. And if no stories survived the journey to you, just tell me where your family called home. I read everyone. Now, dim the lights. Let your shoulders sink into the bed. Take one slow breath in and let it go. The 21st century is dissolving behind you. Somewhere far away, a rooster is about to announce a morning 600 years ago. Let's go meet it together. You wake before the rooster, the way you always do. The light coming through the gap in your shutters is the color of weak ale, not quite gray, not quite gold. Your cottage is 1 room, maybe 2 if you count the little lean-to where you dry your herbs, and every inch of it smells like you. Wood smoke, lavender, tallow, and the faint green sharpness of plants hanging upside down from the rafters. You lie still for a moment, listening. No one is knocking. No one is calling your name from the lane. That means, for now, no baby is coming. You have the rare luxury of a slow morning. You are somewhere in your 50s, which in your world makes you comfortably old. Old enough that your opinion ends arguments. Old enough that young wives lower their voices respectfully when you pass. Your hands are the most educated part of you. They are broad and warm and creased, and they have caught more human beings than you can count. Some winters, you tried counting, sitting by the fire, working backward through the years. You always lost track somewhere past 200. You are a widow, like most women who do your work. Your husband was a decent man, a plowman with a good singing voice, and he's been gone 11 years now. Widowhood, strangely, made your work easier. A married woman answers to a husband's schedule. A widow answers to no one but the church bell and the knock at the door. You can leave at midnight and return at noon, and no one at home goes hungry or wonders where you are. The village understands this. It's part of why women like you are almost always women like you, older, widowed, settled, beyond the busy years of raising your own children. And here is the first thing you should understand about this life. You are not a marginal figure. You are not the strange woman at the edge of the wood. You live in the middle of the village, 3 doors down from the churchyard, and you are woven into this place as tightly as the thatch is woven into your roof. When you walk down the lane, heads turn toward you, not away. Men touch their caps. Women call out to you by name and ask when you'll come. Look at a swollen ankle, a colicky baby, a daughter who's begun her first pregnancy, and can't keep food down. Half of the people in this village entered the world through your hands. Think about that for a moment, because you think about it often. The blacksmith, hammering away at the edge of the green, you caught him on a snowy Candlemas morning, and he came out bellowing like a bull calf, which surprised no one who knows him now. The baker's wife, the reeve's 3 sons, the shy girl who sings in the church choir with a voice like clear water. You were the first person to ever hold each of them, before their mothers, before their fathers, before God's own priest. You. That gives you a strange, quiet kind of standing that no other woman in the village has, and honestly, very few men. The priest is respected because he stands between the village and heaven. The Lord is obeyed because he owns the land under everyone's feet. But you are trusted, which is a different thing entirely, and in some ways a rarer one. People tell you things that they would never tell the priest. You know which marriages are happy and which are held together with gritted teeth. You know which babies came a little early, if you take the calendar's word for it, and you have never once said so out loud. Discretion is as much a part of your craft as your hands are. A midwife who gossips does not stay a midwife long. The whole village may buzz with talk, but you are the still center of it, the woman who hears everything and repeats nothing. Wives trust you with their bodies at the most vulnerable hours of their lives. They have to know that what happens in the birthing chamber stays sealed inside it, like wine in a stoppered jug. And so you've trained your face over the decades into a pleasant, unreadable calm. You'd have made a fine card player, if such a thing existed yet. You rise from your bed, a wooden frame, a mattress stuffed with straw and sweet woodruff, 2 woolen blankets you're rather proud of, and you dress in the near dark without needing to see. Linen shift, wool kirtle the color of dried moss, an apron gone soft from 1,000 washings. You wrap your hair, every strand of it, because a grown woman's hair is a private thing in your world, and you pin the wrap the way your own mother pinned hers. Then you unlatch your door and step out into the morning, and the village is laid out before you in the early light, smoke beginning to rise from a dozen chimneys, a dog stretching in the lane, the church tower catching the first real sun. Someone in this village is pregnant right now. Someone always is. By your private count, 4 women are carrying, and one of them, the miller's young wife, is close enough that you've already started sleeping in your shift with your basket packed by the door. Tonight or tomorrow or 3 days from now, the knock will come. It always comes. But for this one soft morning, the village needs nothing from you but your presence in it. You breathe in the cold air, nod to the swineherd's boy trotting past, and begin your day the way you've begun 10,000 others, unhurried, watchful, and needed. Let's deal with the cauldron in the room, because if you've absorbed any modern idea about medieval midwives, it's probably this one, that women like you lived one bad harvest away from being accused of witchcraft, that the midwife was the witch hunter's favorite target, that your herbs and your knowledge of birth made you suspicious, dangerous, marked. It's in novels, it's in films, it's repeated so confidently that it feels like settled history. It isn't. Historians who actually went through the trial records, thousands of them, across England and the continent, found something that surprised even them. Midwives almost never appear among the accused. Out of the great mass of witchcraft accusations, the women standing trial were overwhelmingly not midwives. They were quarrelsome neighbors, poor widows who begged too insistently, women on the losing end of village feuds. The practicing recognized midwife, the woman half the parish owed their firstborn to, is strikingly, almost stubbornly absent from the defendant's bench. And when midwives do appear in those court records, here is where they usually stand, on the other side of the room, working for the court. When a judge needed someone to examine an accused woman's body or to determine whether a female prisoner was truly pregnant, because a pregnant woman could not be sent to the gallows, the court called in the local midwives as expert examiners. You weren't the hunted, you were the professional the law leaned on when it needed a trustworthy answer about a woman's body. In the machinery of medieval and early modern justice, the midwife was closer to a court official than a suspect. So, where did the myth come from? Mostly from much later centuries. Writers long after the Middle Ages, some of them physicians with a professional interest in making traditional midwives look backward and dangerous, some of them modern authors reaching for a dramatic story, took a few lurid lines from witch hunting manuals and stretched them over the whole profession. The fear made a better story than the truth. It usually does. But the village you woke up in this morning has never read those books, and it never will. To your neighbors, the idea that you might be in league with the devil would be genuinely baffling, roughly as sensible as accusing the church bell. Because think about what your actual position is. You are one of the most vetted, vouched for people in the entire parish. Before you could practice openly, respectable women stood up and testified to your good character. The priest knows you by name and greets you warmly. In many places, the church itself examined and approved midwives, and you swore a solemn oath before God to do your work honestly. You are, if anything, slightly closer to the church than the average villager. You'll see exactly how much closer a little later tonight, because the church trusted you with something it trusted to no other layperson in the village. Your herbs don't make you suspicious either, and this is worth lingering on, because the modern imagination has done strange things to the image of a woman with a garden. In your world, everyone keeps herbs. Every housewife in the village has feverfew and chamomile by her door. The Lord's own kitchen garden grows medicinal plants in tidy rows. The monastery 2 valleys over maintains one of the finest physic gardens in the region, tended by monks who would be astonished to learn that future centuries would consider plant knowledge a mark of the devil. Herbal medicine isn't the occult. It's just medicine. It's what medicine is. What you do carry, and what the village genuinely respects, is knowledge that most people don't have. And here's the thing about that knowledge: it makes you safer, not more vulnerable. A woman whose skill the whole community depends on is a woman the community protects. When a bad winter comes and tempers fray and neighbors start eyeing each other, nobody points at the woman they'll need at their daughter's bedside in the spring. You are too useful to fear and too woven in to cast out. The women whom villages turned on were almost always women the village felt it could afford to lose. You are the opposite of that. None of this means your world is gentle, or that suspicion doesn't exist in it. Your world can be hard and superstitious, and you are careful in the way all sensible people of your time are careful. You use the approved prayers and not unapproved ones. You keep your remedies ordinary and your reputation spotless. But you do this the way a modern professional keeps a clean license, as routine diligence, not as a woman living in fear. So let the cauldron image go, and let it go completely. Watch it dissolve like smoke over the thatch. The real woman, the one whose bed you woke up in tonight, walks through the center of her village in broad daylight, is greeted by the priest, sworn before the bishop, called upon by courts, and welcomed through more front doors than any other soul in the parish. She isn't the village's dark secret. She is one of its brightest fixtures, and her real story, the one we'll spend the rest of tonight inside, is far more interesting than the myth. There was no school for what you do, no lecture hall, no examinations on parchment, no framed credentials on your cottage wall. The universities of your world, Paris, Bologna, Oxford, teach medicine to men in Latin from ancient texts, and not one of those learned doctors will ever attend an ordinary village birth. Childbirth belongs to women completely and by unquestioned custom, and so the knowledge of it lives where women's knowledge has always lived, in memory, in practice, and in the long patient chain of one woman teaching another. Your own chain began when you were perhaps 10 years old, when your mother started bringing you along to births, first just to fetch water and feed the fire, to be a pair of quick feet and quiet eyes. You remember your first birth the way other people remember their first glimpse of the sea. The crowded warm room, the women's voices, the waiting that went on, and then the sudden cry that changed the air in the room like a window thrown open. You were hooked before you understood what you were hooked on. Your mother was the village midwife before you, and her aunt before her, which is a common enough pattern that nobody remarks on it. The craft runs in families the way smithing does, but it isn't inherited like brown eyes. It's taught deliberately and slowly over years. Through your teens, you graduated from fetching water to warming linens, from warming linens to holding a laboring woman steady through her pains, from holding her steady to being allowed, at last, to put your own hands where your mother's hands had always been. You were past 25 before anyone called you a midwife, and past 30 before you believed it yourself. What did she teach you? Start with the calendar. You learned to count a pregnancy in moons, and to reckon from a woman's last courses when the child would likely come, a skill that sounds simple until you realize how much of your reputation rides on it. You learned to read a pregnant body the way a sailor reads weather, the way a woman carries, how the child sits, what her ankles and her color and her appetite are saying. You learned to lay your hands on a great rounded belly and actually know through your palms, which way the baby is lying, where its head is, whether it has turned itself ready for the door. You learned the shape of normal so thoroughly, so deeply, that anything abnormal now rings in you like a cracked bell. That's the real heart of your training, and it can't be gotten from any book. Thousands of hours of ordinary births laid down in your memory layer upon layer until your judgment became something faster than thought. Young wives think your skill is in your hands. It's really in your pattern sense, half a century of accumulated cases, indexed and cross-referenced in a mind that never learned to read. Because no, you can't read. Almost no one you know can, and it has never once made you feel ignorant, because in your world, literacy is a specialized tool, like a mason's chisel, useful for the people whose work requires it, irrelevant to everyone else. Your library is oral. Its rhymes and sayings and rules of thumb, some of them centuries old, passed mouth to ear down the generations of midwives like a long whispered relay. Some of your sayings are shrewd observation dressed as folk wisdom. A few are pure superstition, and even you half suspect it, but they do no harm and they comfort the mothers, so they stay in the collection. And yet, and this might surprise you, written midwifery knowledge does exist in your world, and some of it traces back to a woman. Down in the south, in the sunlit medical school of Salerno, texts on women's medicine have circulated for generations, and the most famous of them carry the name of Trota, a woman who practiced and taught there. Copies and translations of these writings drift slowly across Europe, hand copied, passed between the kind of people who own books. You will never see one, but some of what's in them has reached you anyway, filtered through decades of talk, a remedy recommended by a traveling midwife, a technique your mother heard from a woman who heard it from a woman who served in a great household. Knowledge moves through your world like water through soil, slowly, invisibly, and farther than anyone expects. The last part of your education was the hardest, and your mother saved it for late when she judged you strong enough to carry it. She taught you what to do on the difficult nights, the long labors, the babies who lie the wrong way, the moments when a room full of frightened women turns to you and you alone. She taught you the handful of maneuvers that midwives have quietly perfected across uncounted generations. And she taught you the discipline underneath all of it, the one she repeated until you heard it in your sleep. A frightened midwife frightens the mother. Whatever you feel, your face stays calm and your voice stays warm. You have kept that rule for 30 years. You will keep it until your last birth. Now you are the far end of the chain. Everything your mother poured into you and her aunt poured into her is stored in one aging body, yours, and lately you've begun carefully to pour it onward. But that's a story for later in the night. For now, just feel the weight and the warmth of what you carry. An entire education with no diploma, no classroom, and no equal in the village, written nowhere except in you. By your door, on a low shelf where you could find it blindfolded at midnight, and you effectively have, many times, sits your basket. Every midwife has one, and every midwife's basket is a small portrait of her craft, part toolkit, part pharmacy, part chapel. Yours is woven willow, mended twice, with a leather strap your late husband added so you could sling it over your shoulder and keep both hands free on a dark lane. Let's unpack it slowly, because everything in it has a story and a purpose. On top, always on top, lie the linens. Clean cloth is the great unsung supply of your trade, and you can never have too much of it. Soft washed strips for swaddling, larger cloths for the mother, rags for every purpose a birth can invent. You launder them with more care than you launder anything you own. Dry them in sun when you can get it, and keep them wrapped so they arrive at a birth smelling of air and lavender rather than of your fire. When people in the village have linen too worn for clothing, but too good to burn, they bring it to you. It's one of the small taxes of affection a village pays its midwife. Beneath the linens, your sharp things, and your thread, a small knife, honed and wrapped, a pair of shears, strong linen thread wound on a bone bobbin for tying off the navel cord in two places before it's cut. Tying the cord is one of those tasks that looks trivial and is anything but. Done well, it's the matter of a calm minute. Done sloppily, it invites trouble. So your mother made you practice your knots on cords of wool until you could tie them in the dark, behind your back, half asleep. You still tie the same knot she taught you. You suspect her aunt tied it too. Then the little pots and stoppered flasks, each one sealed with wax and labeled in your own private way. A scratch, a ribbon, a smear of color, since letters are no use to you. Oil is the workhorse, sweet almond oil when you can afford it, good butter or clean rendered fat when you can't, warmed by the fire and used to soften and soothe, to ease the work of birth for the mother's body. There's honey, which is medicine as much as food in your world. There are salves you make yourself each summer, one for sore breasts, one for the baby's skin, one all-purpose wound salve that half the village borrows for reasons that have nothing to do with childbirth. And there are the herbs, of course, folded in twists of cloth, chamomile and fennel for teas that settle a laboring woman's stomach and her nerves, lavender for the room, betony and feverfew for aching heads, raspberry leaf that the village wives swear by in the last weeks of carrying. You are not a physician, and you know it. For the rare troubles beyond your remit, there are other healers, other measures. But for the ordinary discomforts that surround birth like weather, your twists of cloth are the whole of medicine, as far as this village is concerned, and they are honestly not bad medicine at all. Warmth, calm, cleanliness, and chamomile have carried more women through more nights than the learned doctors would ever admit. Now the special things, down at the bottom, wrapped most carefully of all. A smooth brown stone, hollow, with a smaller stone inside that rattles when you shake it. An eagle stone, so called because they're said to be found in eagles' nests. Yours came from your mother, who had it from her aunt. Tied to a laboring woman's thigh, it's believed to draw the child gently toward birth. Does it? You've long since stopped asking the question that way. What you know is that when you tie it on, the mother's shoulders come down from around her ears, and a calmer mother labors better. In your trade, comfort is never nothing. Comfort is half the craft. The grandest treasure of all isn't in your basket because it isn't yours. It belongs to the monastery, and it must be borrowed. A birth girdle, a long strip of parchment, old and soft as cloth, inked with prayers and holy images, made to be laid across a laboring woman's body. Great ladies borrow jeweled relics for their lyings in. Your village borrows the girdle, fetched by a fast-walking husband, and returned with gifts of thanks. When you unroll it across a frightened first-time mother and tell her that women beyond counting have been safely delivered beneath these very prayers, you watch courage come into her face, like color returning. The church notably approves. Prayer at a birth isn't superstition in your world. It's simply what one does, as natural as boiling water. The last item never leaves the basket, though you've used it only a handful of times in 30 years, and each time it has bent your voice with awe. A tiny flask of clean water. Plain water, but carried for the most solemn purpose imaginable, one the church has placed in your hands, and yours alone among the village's lay people, You'll understand its full weight later tonight. For now, tuck it back beneath the linens, settle the cloth over everything, and set the basket back on its shelf by the door, packed, ready, as it always is, as it always must be. Somewhere out in the darkening village, the miller's young wife is heavy and waiting, and this basket will beat you to the door. You'll snatch it mid-stride, already moving. But not tonight. Tonight it sits quiet on its shelf, and the only sound in your cottage is the fire settling, soft as a sleeping breath. Behind your cottage, fenced with woven hazel to keep the neighbors' hens out, lies the other half of your pharmacy, your garden. It's not large, a dozen paces by 8, but it is, without exaggeration, the most carefully tended plot in the village, and you know every plant in it the way a shepherd knows his flock, individually, by history and by temperament. Understand first that a garden like yours is completely ordinary in your world, and that's precisely what makes it worth lingering over. Every cottage has its herb patch. The manor house has a bigger one. The monastery's physic garden, laid out in beds as neat as a chessboard, is famous for 3 valleys around. Growing medicine is simply part of housekeeping, the way keeping a fire is, because in your world, the garden is the medicine cabinet, the spice rack, and the perfume shop all at once. What sets yours apart isn't secrecy or strangeness, it's only depth. Where a housewife grows 6 herbs, you grow 40. Walk the rows with your morning cup of small ale and greet them. Here's chamomile, sprawling and cheerful, the most used plant you own. Tea for nerves, tea for sleep, tea for the stomach, a wash for sore skin. Here's fennel, tall and feathery, beloved of new mothers. Sage and betony, yarrow and feverfew, comfrey that the village calls knitbone, marigolds whose petals go into half your salves. Lavender and rose for scent, because you learned long ago that a birthing room that smells sweet is a birthing room where fear has a harder time taking hold. And raspberry canes along the back fence, their leaves picked and dried for the teas that expectant mothers drink through their final weeks. Some of what you grow is dinner as much as medicine, and you'd be the first to say the line between the two barely exists. Garlic and onions, worts and good pot herbs. In your world, food is the first physic, and a well-fed mother is a stronger mother. When you visit a pale young wife in her early months and find her larder thin, you don't reach for a remedy. You have a quiet word with her mother-in-law about eggs and pottage, and you check back in a fortnight. Half of medieval medicine, done properly, is just looking after people, and nobody in the village does more of it than you. Your year in this garden has a rhythm as fixed as the church calendar. In spring, you sow and divide and beg cuttings. There's a whole quiet economy of women trading plants over fences, and you sit at the wealthy end of it, since everyone wants a start from the midwife's stock. High summer is harvest. You cut herbs in the warm mid-morning after the dew has dried, when their strength is greatest, and you carry them in by the armful until your rafters are furred with hanging bundles and your whole cottage smells like a crushed meadow. Autumn is for roots, dug and scrubbed and sliced. And winter is for making. Salves stirred slow over the fire, herbs steeped in oil by the hearth, honey mixed and potted, everything stoppered, sealed, and set on the shelf in your own unlettered code. You do all this with an almanac in your head that mixes sound observation and old belief so thoroughly that even you can't always find the seam. Cut herbs after the dew dries, that one you defend to anyone. Wet herbs mold. Certain plants gathered on certain saints' days are held to be stronger, and perhaps that's only the calendar wearing a halo, but the saints' days fall in the right season anyway, so the custom does its job. Your world reasons like this everywhere. Practical wisdom and pious tradition twined together like the honeysuckle on your fence, impossible to separate without killing both. And you share. This matters, so let it settle in gently. Your garden is not a private hoard, and your knowledge is not a guarded secret. Village wives come to your fence all summer long to ask for a handful of this, a start of that, advice about a child's cough or a husband's aching back. You hand things over the hazel fence freely, along with instructions delivered in the firm, warm voice of a woman who expects to be obeyed. In return, things flow back to you: eggs, a cabbage, mended shoes, first pick of a neighbor's plums. There's no coin in most of it. It's older than coin. It's the slow, deep barter of a village looking after itself, and you are one of the main channels it flows through. Sometimes, on an evening like this one, you stand at the end of the rows while the light goes amber and just look at it all. 40 kinds of green, humming with the last bees, every plant a chapter of inherited knowledge, older than the church tower. Your mother grew most of these same herbs in this same soil. Some of the actual plants are hers still. The sage is from her sage, the roses from her roses, cuttings of cuttings, going back further than memory. A garden like this is a lineage you can water. You pinch a leaf of lavender, roll it between your fingers, and breathe it in. Then you latch the hazel gate the way you have 10,000 times and go inside to your supper. The garden settles into the dusk behind you, doing what it does every night, quietly growing tomorrow's medicine while the village sleeps. Before we follow you out into the night for a birth, you should know the sea of beliefs you swim in, because your village holds an entire invisible library of lore about pregnancy and birth, and part of your job, never written into any oath, is to be its head librarian. You know every belief, every omen, every custom. Some you trust, some you tolerate, some you quietly steer around. All of them you handle with respect, because in your world, belief itself is a kind of medicine. Start with the guessing games, the ones played over every rounded belly in the parish. Is it a boy or a girl? The village has a dozen tests and total confidence in all of them, despite their long habit of contradicting each other. Carrying high means one thing, carrying low another. A mother craving sweets is said to carry a girl, craving sharp and salty, a boy. They dangle a wedding ring on a thread over the belly and rid its swing. Circles for a girl, a straight line for a boy, or possibly the reverse. The village argues about it every single time, which is of course the entire pleasure of the custom. You're always asked for your verdict, and you deliver it with the gravity of a bishop, a hand laid on the belly, a long considering pause, and a pronouncement. You're right about half the time, which after 30 years, everyone has politely declined to notice. Half is exactly what the game requires. Cravings themselves are taken seriously, genuinely seriously. Your world believes a pregnant woman's longings must be satisfied, that denying them can harm mother or child, And so a wife with a sudden hunger for cherries in April becomes the whole household's problem, and sometimes half the lane's. You've watched grown men trudge miles in the rain over a craving. You approve of the belief wholeheartedly, and not because you're sure of the medicine, because it takes a tired, heavy, uncomfortable woman and makes her the center of care for 9 long months. Any custom that does that, you'll defend to your last breath. Then there's the lore of labor itself, and here the customs turn to what you might call sympathetic help. When a birth runs long, the household sets about opening things, doors unlatched, chests unlocked, shutters unbarred, every knot in the house untied, the dwelling itself loosened, as if to show the baby how it's done. Arrows must not be shot, ale must not be bunged, nothing in the house should be sealed or stopped while a woman labors. Does an unlocked chest hasten a birth? You have your private doubts, but you've never once stopped a family from doing it because you've seen what the custom actually accomplishes. It gives the helpless something to do. A frightened young husband untying every knot in his house is a frightened young husband usefully occupied, and his wife, hearing the busy loosening all around her, feels the whole household pulling with her. That's not nothing. In your experience, that's never nothing. Some babies bring their own omens with them. Now and then a child is born, still wrapped in the caul, a fine veil of the birth membrane over the head and face. And when it happens, the room catches its breath because a caul is famous luck. A child born in the caul, the whole world agrees, is marked for fortune, and above all can never drown. Sailors will pay good silver for a preserved caul to carry to sea, and the lucky scrap is dried and kept, and sometimes handed down a family like a jewel. You've delivered a number of keel children in your years, lifting the veil from each small face with your gentlest fingers, while the gossips whispered. The church has its reservations about some of the wilder claims. The village pays the reservations no attention whatsoever. Neither privately do the sailors. Timing is read like scripture, too. A birth on a great feast day is auspicious. Certain days are whispered to be less kind. A child who arrives at the chime of the church bell, or with the first cock crow, gets that detail attached to their name for life. The village keeps such facts the way later ages will keep documents. And through all this lore runs the deep general habit of your world. Everything means something. A magpie on the birth house roof, a candle that gutters at a christening, the first word a mother speaks after her delivery. All of it is noticed, weighed, discussed at the well for a week. Where do you stand, you, the professional, in this sea of belief? Exactly where a wise woman stands, in the middle with your balance. You are no scoffer. You keep your eagle stone. You love Saint Margaret. You cross yourself at magpies like everyone else, and you have seen enough strangeness in 30 years of midnight rooms to hold your certainties loosely. But you are the one person in the parish whose head must stay clear when the omens turn gloomy. The one who can say, in a voice like a warm hand on the shoulder, never mind the candle, the child is pink and strong and feeding, and be believed. That's the real trick of your position, because the village trusts you completely on the things that can be seen. It trusts you on the things that can't. You spend that trust carefully, one calm sentence at a time, always in the same cause, against fear and for the mother. A magpie, a wedding ring on a thread, a house with every knot untied, holding its breath. Keep the picture. It's the truest map of your world you'll get tonight. Not a dark age, and not a simple one. A world thick with meaning, doing its best with the tools it had to wrap its most dangerous ordinary miracle in as much luck as it could weave. And moving through the middle of it all, steady as a lantern, you. It comes, when it comes, the way it always comes. Three urgent raps on your door in the dead of night, and a voice you half recognize calling your name into the dark. Tonight it's the miller's brother-in-law, breathless, holding a horn lantern that throws his shadow 10 feet up your wall. The miller's young wife, her first child. The pains started at supper, and now they're coming close together, and the women of the house have sent for you, which means it's real. You were asleep, and now you are not, with almost nothing in between. 30 years of night summonses have trained the grogginess out of you. You wake like a soldier, or like a mother, which is much the same skill. You're already talking as you dress, calm, unhurried questions that do two jobs at once, gathering what you need to know and slowing the poor man's galloping heart. How close are the pains? When did her waters go? Who's with her? Has she eaten? His answers tell you this is a normal first labor, moving at a normal first labor pace, which means you have time, which means you will walk to the mill briskly, but you will not run. A midwife arriving at a run frightens everyone in the house. A midwife arriving at a steady walk, basket on her shoulder, is already half the medicine. You bank your fire, sling the basket, and step out into the night. And oh, the night. If you've never stood in a world without a single electric light, you can't quite imagine what you step into. Darkness with texture to it, layers of black and blue black, and above it a sky so thick with stars, it looks less like scattered points than like spilled flour. The moon is 3/4 full tonight. You noted it earlier, the way you always do, because moonlight is a working tool in your trade. Babies do not consult the calendar, but at least this one has chosen a night when you can see the road. The village at this hour is a different country. Every cottage is shuttered and dark, breathing wood smoke from banked fires. A dog investigates you, recognizes you. Every dog in this village knows you, and escorts you importantly to the edge of his territory before handing you off to the night. Your feet know this lane so well you could walk it blind, and effectively you are, past the well, past the churchyard where your husband and your parents sleep, over the little bridge where the stream talks quietly to itself, and on toward the mill at the village's edge, where, there, a line of golden light shows under the shutters. The only lit window in the world, all of it waiting for you. The miller meets you at the door, and he has the classic look of a first-time father. A large, capable man, rendered completely useless, holding a cup of ale he has forgotten he's holding. You've seen this exact face several hundred times. You give him the exact medicine it needs, a firm arm squeeze, a look straight in the eyes, and the words you always say. All is well. This is women's work now. Keep the fire fed and the water coming, and we'll call you when there's someone to meet. Watch the relief move through him. Men in your world are not permitted in the birthing room, and most of them are profoundly grateful for it. He will spend the next hours with his brother-in-law by the kitchen fire, being useless together, which is its own ancient male tradition, and in its way, its own vigil. You climb the stairs toward the voices and pause here one beat on the dark middle stair, because this is a moment you have never stopped noticing, not in 30 years. Below you, the ordinary world, ale and firewood and a nervous husband. Above you, the oldest room there is, the one where every human being who has ever lived first arrived. Between one stair and the next, you put on your working self the way a priest puts on his vestments, face calm, voice warm, hands sure. Whatever tonight brings, the woman above you will read her fortunes in your face, so your face will tell her only good ones. You push open the door, and warmth and firelight and the smell of lavender spill over you. Three women turn toward you at once, the girl's mother, her aunt, a neighbor, and you watch the same relief wash through them that you gave the miller at the door, because your arrival changes the arithmetic of the room. And from the bed, the miller's young wife, 17 and round as a harvest moon, flushed and scared and gripping her mother's hand, looks up at you. You smile at her like sunrise. Well then, sweetheart, you say, setting your basket down. I hear this baby of yours is in a hurry to meet us all. Let's see about that. And her frightened face cracks into a laugh, the first one you'd wager since supper. That laugh is the true beginning of the night's work, and you've earned it before even setting out your linens. The rest will take as long as it takes. You have arrived, and everything after this happens in the birthing chamber. So let's follow you in and pull the door gently shut behind us. The room you've just entered has been transformed, and if you could see it with modern eyes, the transformation would tell you almost everything about how your world thinks birth should work. This was an ordinary bedchamber at sunset. Now the shutters are closed and latched tight, and cloth has been stuffed into every gap and cranny. Even the keyhole is plugged. The fire is built up until the room is almost too warm, the way you like it. Rushlights and a good beeswax candle push the shadows back. The room has been sealed like a little ship, warm and golden, and separate from the whole cold world, and it will stay sealed until the voyage is over. Why seal it? Ask the women here, and you'd get layered answers, custom and comfort and caution all braided together. Night air is held to be perilous. Drafts, everyone agrees, are the enemy of mothers and infants alike. An enclosed room keeps warmth in, and warmth, your long experience agrees, genuinely helps a laboring woman. Cold and shivering are fear's assistants. But underneath the practical reasons runs something older and softer, the instinct that birth needs an inside, a den, a held space, closed against everything, where one thing only is happening. Your world has no word for it, but every village wife knows the shape of it in her bones, and they build it every time out of shutters and firelight and cloth stuffed in a keyhole. Now count the room, 5 women, soon 6 when the smith's wife arrives, and not a man for 100 feet. This is the absolute, unquestioned rule of your world. Birth is women's territory, entirely. The learned doctor wouldn't come to a village birth and wouldn't be wanted. The husband keeps to the kitchen. Even the priest waits to be sent for, and everyone prays he won't be needed. The women filling the room have a name. They're called the gossips. Before that word ever meant idle talk, it meant this: godsibs, godsiblings, the close female companions a woman calls to her lying in, kinswomen, neighbors, friends. A birth in your world is not a private medical event. It's a gathering. And it truly is a gathering. That's the thing that would most surprise a modern visitor peeking into this golden, sealed room. Between the panes, especially in these early hours, the chamber sounds less like a hospital than like a small warm feast. The gossips talk. They tell stories, birth stories above all, every woman's own deliveries retold and improved with age, tales of prodigious babies and absurd husbands, the entire oral literature of motherhood performed in installments between contractions. There's laughter, actual frequent laughter. There's food and drink set by. The young wife at the center of it labors inside a wrap of familiar voices, and when a pain takes her, the talk drops to a hum. The nearest women lend their hands and their steadiness, and when it passes, the room breathes out and the stories resume. There's even a signature drink for the occasion, and you're handed a cup of it now. Caudle, warm ale or wine, thickened and sweetened, spiced as generously as the household can manage. Every region makes it differently, and every family swears by its own. The mother sips it for strength through her labor. The gossips drink it in solidarity, in what might charitably be called supportive quantities. A good caudle at a birth is such a fixed custom that the words go together like bread and butter. It is, when you think about it, a peculiar and rather wonderful thing. Your world has decided that the proper accompaniment to labor is a warm spiced drink shared among friends, that birth, for all its gravity, is at bottom a festivity. Inside all this warmth, you work. While the gossips keep the young wife's spirits wrapped and lifted, you make your quiet circuit. You set out your linens where the fire will keep them warm. You warm your oil in its little pot near the coals. You lay your hands on the great taut curve of her belly during and between the pains, reading. The child is head down, well placed, exactly as it should be. You time her pains against your own steady pulse. Everything this room can tell you, it's telling you, and everything it says is good. You catch the mother's eye, the girl's mother hovering with her heart in her face, and give her one small nod and watch 10 years fall off her. The laboring girl herself is not lying down and won't be for hours yet. That's a habit of later centuries. In your world, a woman labors upright and moving for as long as she has strength, walking the room on her mother's arm, leaning on the bedpost through the panes, kneeling, swaying, resting on a stool between whiles. Your job in these hours is mostly to keep her moving, keep her sipping, keep her warm, and keep the fear from finding a way in through some unstuffed crack. The gossips handle morale. You handle everything else. It's a division of labor as old as villages. Hours pass like this, and the room finds its rhythm, pain and release, story and laughter, the fire fed, the caudle passed, the night outside utterly forgotten. There's nowhere else in your entire world quite like a birthing chamber at midnight, a sealed golden bubble of women, suspended between one generation and the next. You've spent half your life inside these rooms, and they have never once stopped feeling holy. But the rhythm is changing now. Her pains are longer, closer, deeper, the stories have stopped, and the gossips are looking to you. The waiting part of the night is ending. The working part begins. If you asked the village what a midwife's greatest skill is, they'd say her hands. If you asked the midwife, she'd give you a different answer, and she'd give it without hesitating: patience. The deepest thing your mother ever taught you is that birth in the vast majority of cases, knows how to happen. It has been happening since Eve. The body laboring in front of you is running a process older than language, and your first and greatest task is to let it run, to watch with total attention and interfere with almost nothing. The impatient birth attendant, meddling and hurrying, causes more grief than ignorance ever did. You wait like a fisherman. You wait like a cat. Waiting done at your level is a craft in itself. But it's not idle waiting. And now, in the deep hours, your real work threads itself through every minute. You keep her upright and moving as long as moving serves her. You have her sip coddle for strength and chamomile for calm. You warm oil in your palms and work it into the small of her back where the pains grind hardest, your strong thumbs finding the exact aching places. You've soothed several hundred backs, and you could find those places on a statue. You murmur the steady litany that is half instruction, half lullaby. That's it, sweetheart. Don't fight it. Let it come and let it go. Each one is one less. You breathe audibly, slowly, and her breathing follows yours without her knowing it. The oldest trick in your considerable book. You check her progress with practiced hands and clean intent, gently, only as often as truly needed. Between times, you read the signs that need no touching at all. The sounds she makes, shifting register, hour by hour like a slow song. The trembling in her thighs, the moment she stops answering the gossip's chatter. The particular inward look, as if listening to far-off instructions, that tells you she's crossed into the final country of labor. When you see that look, you send the mother to warm the swaddling bands, and you draw your basket close. It won't be long now. Now comes the furniture of the moment. In your world, a woman gives birth sitting up, and for it there is the birthing stool, a low, sturdy, horseshoe-shaped seat, open at the front, its worn wooden arms polished by the grip of every laboring mother in this parish for 2 generations. Some of your villages share one. Some households keep their own. A great lady would have a fine carved one. The girl is helped onto it, her mother behind her to be her backrest and her anchor, a gossip at each side gripped hand to hand. And you take your place before her, on your knees on a folded blanket, at the level where the work is. The whole room has quietly assembled itself into a machine of women, built and rebuilt at every birth for 1,000 years, with you at the turning point of it. The last part of labor asks everything the girl has, and your voice goes with her into every effort. Now, sweetheart, now push, good, rest. Your warmed hands support and guide and ease. There are touches here, learned and precise, that protect the mother in ways she'll never know to thank you for, tricks of angle and timing that are the purest distillation of your 30 years. And then, between one moment and the next, the way it always somehow manages to surprise even you, there is a child in your 2 hands, warm, slippery, furious, astonishingly alive. A great gulped breath, and then the cry, thin, raspy, outraged, and to every soul in this room, the finest sound on God's earth. The gossips laugh and weep in the same breath. Below in the kitchen, you know the miller has just heard it through the floorboards and dropped his forgotten ale. And here, right at the halfway point of our night together, let me whisper just one small thing. If these long, quiet journeys into the past are helping you drift off, tap that like button before sleep takes you. It helps more tired souls find their way to this calm corner of history. That's all. Now back to the village, where the fire is warm and there's plenty of story left. A girl, you announce, and grand lungs on her. Your hands keep working through the joy on their own 30-year habit. The cord tied in two places with your bone bobbin thread tied with your mother's knot and cut. The baby wiped clean and checked over. You have a swift, complete inventory you take of every newborn, fingers and toes, and color and cry, then swaddled snug in the warmed bands and set, at last, where the whole night has been aiming her, into her mother's arms. You always watch this moment. 17 years old, wrung out like a rag, the girl looks down into the small red face and simply vanishes into it. Hello, she whispers. There's more work for you yet. The afterbirth to be delivered whole and inspected, the mother made comfortable and clean, warm broth started. But the summit is behind you. The rest is downhill in gentle light. And now, softly, because you would want it said honestly, not every night of your long life has ended in this golden room. You have known nights of sorrow, a handful across 3 decades, each one a name you still hold. On those nights, the same women closed around the family like a hand, and the priest was sent for, and you stayed till dawn, doing the last kind things, because a midwife does not leave. You carry those names to church with you, and you light candles on their days. They are part of the true weight of your office, and you bear them the way you bear everything, with steadiness, and without letting them steal what is owed to nights like tonight. And what you would insist a modern listener understand is that nights like tonight are the rule, not the exception. The overwhelming run of your work ends exactly like this: a crying child, a laughing room, a family enlarged. You are not a tragic figure. You are the most practiced pair of hands in the parish, and you are very, very good at this. Dawn is seeping gray around the shutters when you finally sit, accept a cup of the victor's caudle, and let the gossips fuss over you for a change. Across the room, the girl is drowsing with her daughter on her chest, both of them breathing in the same rhythm. You'll doze an hour in the chair, then walk home through the waking village with your basket lighter and your heart full. Behind you, in the sealed golden room, a brand new person is dreaming her first dreams. Remember the little flask of clean water at the bottom of your basket, the one carried for the most solemn purpose imaginable? It's time to tell you what it's for, because it is, without any exaggeration, the single most extraordinary fact about your position in medieval society. It's the clearest proof of how completely wrong the witch-hunted midwife myth gets your world. And it's this: you, an unlettered village widow, are authorized by the church itself to perform a sacrament. Sit with how strange that is for a moment. Your world is arranged in careful layers, and sacraments live at the very top of it, in the hands of ordained priests, men set apart by years of preparation and the touch of a bishop. Lay people do not perform sacraments. Women, above all, do not. There is no female clergy in your world, no exception, no argument. And yet there is exactly one door in that great wall, one sacrament that ordinary hands are permitted to administer when death is near and no priest can come: baptism. And the layperson most likely to stand at that door, the one the church specifically expects to be there, prepares, examines, and trusts, is the midwife. The reasoning is simple, and in the logic of your world, absolutely urgent. Baptism, your church teaches, is the gate of salvation, and a newborn's first hours are the most dangerous of life. When a birth goes hard and a baby comes into the world flickering like a candle in a draught, there is no time to send a boy running through the night for the priest. Someone in that sealed room must be able to act at once, in that very minute. And so the church, with perfect practicality, placed the power where the need was, in the birthing chamber, in your hands. This is why the priest himself taught you the words. Picture it, one of the quiet astonishments of your life. You, a young midwife then, standing in the vestry while the parish priest walked you through the formula slowly, again and again, until he was satisfied. The water poured, the words said plainly and in order, I baptize thee in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. He taught you what makes a baptism true and what would spoil it. He told you gravely that said rightly by you, it counts as fully as if the bishop himself had said it in the cathedral. The church draws no distinction at all. When bishops visit the parishes to inspect them, among the things they inquire after is precisely this. Do the midwives know the words of baptism correctly? You are, in this one narrow and shining respect, part of the machinery of salvation, officially, on the record. You have used that power a handful of times in 30 years, kneeling by firelight with your little flask, saying the words over a tiny struggling life while the room held its breath around you. However those nights ended, the words changed them. When a child lived, the church later completed the ceremonies with all solemnity, your emergency baptism standing at the heart of it, valid and honored. And when a child did not live, the words meant the family grieved a baptized soul, a child of heaven, buried in holy ground with all the others. In the deepest understanding of your world, on the worst nights of your work, you were the difference that mattered most. The village knows it. It is a large part of why the village looks at you the way it does. With the power came the oath, and yours is one of the vivid memories of your life. Standing before the church authorities as a woman of about 30, your mother and 2 respectable wives of the parish there to vouch for your character and skill, your hand raised, swearing. The oaths midwives swore survive in the old records, and they are a portrait of exactly how much trust was being placed in you. You swore to serve poor women and rich alike, to come when called whether or not there was money in it. You swore never to exchange one woman's baby for another's, never to allow a birth to be falsely reported, never to name a false father, because you, and only you, are the sworn witness of who is born and to whom. You swore to use no sorcery and only lawful prayer, to perform emergency baptism rightly with the true words and clean water, and to report honestly all that honesty required. Then the wives who vouched for you kissed your cheek, and you walked out of that church as something new, a sworn officer of your parish, in everything but the title. Turn that over once more before we move on, because it's the heart of tonight's myth busting, and it deserves to be seen in full light. The fiction says the church feared the midwife. The record says the church deputized her. She was examined by priests, sworn before God, vouched for by the community, inspected by bishops, and entrusted with the one sacramental power any layperson could hold. There were, in the whole structure of the medieval village, precisely 2 people licensed to stand at the border between this world and the next, and perform the rites that mattered there. One was the priest, The other one is you, and no one, not the Lord, not the reeve, not the wealthiest man in the parish, no one else even comes close. So, what does all this skill actually earn you? Let's talk about your living, because it's a picture of how a village economy really works, and it's far more textured than a simple wage. Midwifery pays, but it pays in the full currency of your world, which means it pays in everything. Sometimes it pays in actual coin. The miller, flush with joy and milled grain, will press silver pennies into your hand when you visit tomorrow, and a prosperous birth like that, one might earn you what a laboring man makes in several days. When the franklin's wife or the knight's lady is brought to bed, the fee climbs handsomely, and there may be a gift besides: cloth, a goose, wine from the manor's own store. Custom in many places adds a lovely bonus. The midwife receives something extra at the christening feast, where she is an honored guest, seated well, toasted, and this is your favorite part of the whole business. It is often you, not the mother, who carries the baby in glory to the church door. The mother is still resting at home in her lying in month. So down the lane you go on christening morning, the newest human in the parish, dressed in white and riding on your arm, the whole procession behind you. You've led that parade a few hundred times. It has never once gotten old. But most of your income never touches a coin, because most of your patients barely touch coins themselves. The cotter's wife pays you in eggs, delivered a few at a time across a whole season. The shepherd pays in a fleece. You're paid in cheeses, in ale, in a hank of spun wool, in firewood split and stacked without your asking, in your fences mended by grateful husbands, and your plot plowed alongside a neighbor's. And plenty of births you attend knowing the family can pay you nothing at all. Remember your oath: the poor serve the same as the rich. You keep that oath, and the village sees you keep it. And here's the quiet economics of it: every unpaid birth deepens the village's debt to you in the older ledger, the one kept in memory and regard, and a woman rich in that ledger never goes cold or hungry in a village like this. It isn't charity in either direction. It's the web, and you sit near the center of it. Now for the part of your standing that surprises modern listeners most, because your expertise doesn't stop at the birthing chamber door. It walks out of that door and into the courtroom. In a world of inheritance and legitimacy, of marriage law and church law, questions about women's bodies carry enormous legal weight, and when the law needs those questions answered, it does not ask the learned physician who's never attended a birth. It asks you. Consider what hangs on your kind of knowledge. An estate passes to an heir, but was the child truly born alive, even briefly? Property law can turn on that single breath, and the midwife is the witness who was there. A widow claims to be carrying her late husband's heir. A jury of respectable matrons, midwives prominent among them, is impaneled to examine her and report the truth to the court. A woman convicted of a hanging crime declares she is with child, because the law, hard as it is, will not execute an unborn innocent. And again the matrons and midwives are summoned, and the sentence itself waits on their verdict. Even the church courts call on midwives when marriage disputes turn on intimate questions no man can properly investigate. Across all of it runs the same remarkable premise. In a world where women cannot be judges, cannot be lawyers, can testify only within limits, the sworn word of experienced women about a woman's body is accepted, formally, as expertise. It's one of the only doors in the whole edifice of medieval law that opens specifically and only to women, and you have walked through it. You've served such duty 3 times in your life, walking to the court sessions in your best kirtle, standing with the other matrons, delivering your findings in a steady voice, while clerks scratched your words into the record. Strange hours, those. Your hand's knowledge translated into law's language, your judgment binding on the fates of strangers. You told the exact truth all 3 times, as your oath required, and walked home each time very quiet, feeling the weight of what you carry sitting differently on your shoulders than it does at a birth. And underneath the coin and the eggs and the courtroom summonses lies the true asset, the one everything else stands on, your reputation. It is, in the most literal sense, your license to practice. You were admitted to this craft on the sworn word of women who vouched for your character, and you continue in it only so long as the parish's trust continues. Reputation in your world is not an ornament, it's infrastructure. Yours has been built the slow way, birth by birth and year by year, and secret by kept secret for 3 decades, and it is now as solid as the church tower and nearly as visible. When you walk to the well, it walks with you. When your name is spoken in a house you've never entered, it arrives before you like a good servant, opening doors. Rich in pennies, then? No, not especially, though you're comfortable with your snug cottage and your full shelves and your 2 proud woolen blankets. But count the whole estate, fed by half the village, feted at every christening, consulted by courts of law, sworn before God, welcome at every door, and owed the kind of debts that can never be called in because they can never be repaid. By the only accounting your world takes seriously, you may be the wealthiest woman in the parish. Let's stay at the mill a little longer, because the small person you delivered there is now beginning one of the most carefully choreographed weeks of medieval life, a newborn's first days. Your world may keep no birth certificates, but don't mistake that for carelessness. Around every new baby, custom closes like 2 cupped hands, and you, who deliver the child and then visit daily through the lying in, get to watch the whole gentle ceremony from the best seat in the parish. Begin with the swaddling, since it begins within the first hour and defines a medieval baby's whole early world. You wrapped the miller's daughter yourself in warmed linen bands, snug from shoulders to feet, arms tucked, until she made a neat, calm little parcel, and to modern eyes that wrapping might look strange, but hear your world's reasoning, because it isn't foolish. A newborn, your world observes, has just left the snuggest lodging in creation. Bound warm and close, babies startle less and sleep more, and every mother in the parish will tell you a well-swaddled child is a contented one. Your world also believes the wrapping helps young limbs grow straight, its medicine mixing, as always, sound observation with hopeful theory. So for these early months, the baby will live as a warm, portable bundle, unwrapped at intervals for cleaning and stretching and kicking by the fire, then bound up cozy again. You've swaddled hundreds. You could do it, and once, on a wager at a christening feast, did do it, with your eyes shut. Home, for the bundle, is the cradle, and a village cradle is a lovely thing to consider. A small wooden boat on rockers, often older than everyone in the house, passed between families as the babies come. Half the infants in this parish have slept in one of perhaps a dozen cradles in slow rotation for 2 generations. It stands by the hearth in the warm heart of the household where the fire keeps the chill off and the whole family's daily life eddies around it. A medieval baby is almost never alone and almost never out of arm's reach. The cradle is rocked by whoever is nearest mother, grandmother, a sibling of 5 with a foot on the rocker and porridge in both hands. Nights, the baby sleeps close by the mother's bed through the lying in, within reach of a hand in the dark. As for feeding, here your world is simple and you'd say sensible. Village babies are nursed by their mothers for a long time by later standards, commonly a year and often well beyond. It's the great ladies who send their infants out to wet nurses. A village wife nurses her own, with you supervising the start of it during your daily visits, because nursing is a skill like any other, and the first days can be tearful. You have a whole quiet repertoire for those first days positions, comforts, your fennel tea, and above all, your unhurried voice saying the sentence you've said 1,000 times. You're both new at this. Give it 3 days. It's among your most reliable remedies. Almost nothing about a newborn, you've learned, isn't improved by 3 days. But the great event of the first week, the true door into medieval life, is the christening, and it comes fast, usually within days of birth, sometimes on the very next. There's no waiting for a convenient season in your world. Baptism is the child's entry into the community of Christendom, and no one dawdles at that door. And so, mere days after the birth, you find yourself at the center of the parade you love best, the mother still resting at home in her lying in, and you, by long custom, carrying the baby in her white christening cloth at the head of the procession to the church, through the village, past every well and doorway, with the father and the godparents, and half the lane falling in behind. The godparents matter enormously, and choosing them is one of the weightiest decisions new parents make, often settled before the birth, sometimes negotiated like a small treaty. Godparents are the child's second family, sponsors before God, and very practically, allies for life. They answer for the child at the font. They owe the child guidance and help ever after, and the bond they form with the parents has its own name. They become godsibs to the household, gossips, that word again, the whole warm web knitting itself one christening at a time. Families choose with care a respected neighbor, a prosperous kinsman, sometimes an eye toward a useful connection, because your world sees no shame at all in god parentage that's both holy and handy. At the font, the child receives the name, and namings in your world follow custom's well-worn grooves. Babies are named for godparents, most commonly of all, for grandparents, for the saint on whose feast day they arrived. And so the same good sturdy names ring down the generations until half the village answers to a handful of them, and everyone goes by some tag. Alice at the mill, John the younger, Long Meg, to keep the census straight. The miller's daughter, you happen to know, will be named for her godmother, who wept when she was asked. Then the priest does his office, the water is poured, the church completing with full ceremony what your little flask stands ready to begin in emergencies, and the party sweeps back to the house for the christening feast, where the ale flows, the godparents give their gifts, and the midwife, as previously established, is toasted and seated in honor, and enjoys herself thoroughly. And that's the machinery, complete, swaddled, cradled, nursed, sponsored, named, baptized, feasted, 1 week old, and already tied into the parish by a dozen threads of kinship, godparenthood, and custom. Your world writes none of it down. It doesn't need to. The whole village is the record, and you, who stood at the font a few days after standing at the birth, are its living first page. Once in a while, a handful of times across your career, the summons to your door arrives not as a breathless brother in law with a horn lantern, but as a liveried servant on an actual horse. The lady of the manor is nearing her time, and the household requests the attendance of the midwife. And so tonight, before we leave your working life behind, let's give you one of those rare nights, because nothing shows the shape of your world quite like watching your ancient craft walk into a great house. Your first discovery is that nobility prepares for birth the way it prepares for war, with provisioning, protocol, and enormous expense. Where the miller's wife had a sealed bedchamber, the lady has an entire prepared world. Weeks before the birth, following custom observed in great households and perfected in royal ones, the lady formally withdraws from public life. Her taking to her chamber is practically a ceremony in itself, with a special mass, a procession, a great spiced farewell in the hall, and enters a suite transformed for the purpose. You're led up to it past more wealth than your whole village sees in a year, and you step into a room done entirely in cloth, walls hung with tapestries, windows curtained and muffled, the great bed dressed in furs and fine linen, carpets underfoot where your cottage mothers have rushes. The same sealed warm den your village builds from shutters and rag-stuffed keyholes. In other words, built here from wool and silk at 100 times the cost. You note this with a private inward smile. The instinct is identical, only the budget has changed. The holy armory is grander too. Where your village borrows the monastery's one worn birth girdle, a great family borrows genuine treasures, relics fetched from famous shrines, a jeweled reliquary on the sideboard, the girdle of some renowned saint, lent by an abbey that would not lend it to just anyone. Candles burn before an image of Saint Margaret, your Margaret, the same patroness exactly, which pleases you absurdly. The lady's chaplain hovers near the door of the suite, praying on schedule. Heaven, you observe, is petitioned up here through considerably more expensive channels. You privately suspect the messages arrive at the same speed, and the room is full of women that law of your world holds in a castle precisely as it holds in a cottage. No man crosses into the birth chamber, be he chaplain, physician, or the Lord himself. The lady is attended entirely by women through her confinement. But look who the women are: gentlewomen companions, waiting women, an experienced lady of the household presiding over the chamber's management, and notably a midwife of reputation, engaged and rewarded handsomely, because when the stakes are an heir to lands and name, great families seek out the most experienced hands they can secure, which is how you come to be here, scrubbed and in your best kirtle, your willow basket looking humble and true on a carved oak chest that's worth more than your cottage. Is the work different? Here is the finest lesson of your rare grand nights. No, the fire is fed with better wood, and the caudle comes in silver. The linen is finer than any you've ever touched, and there's more of it than you could use in a year. But the labor itself is the labor itself. The same hours, the same waiting, the same climbing rhythm, the same fear needing the same steady voice. For a lady wrapped in furs is exactly as frightened as a girl of 17 at a mill, and your "that's it, sweetheart. Let it come and let it go" works on her exactly the same, even if you amend the "sweetheart" to "my lady" after the first slip, which she, to her lasting credit, laughed at. The same patience, the same old maneuvers of angle and timing, and at the end of it, the same instant that levels every rank in Christendom, a small, furious cry, and a room full of women, gentle and simple, silk and wool alike, laughing and weeping in the same breath. The differences resume immediately afterward, of course, and they're instructive. The child, an heir as it happens, to the visible relief of the entire building, is whisked into a machinery of care your village couldn't imagine. A wet nurse already engaged in waiting, chosen after inquiries into her health and character as careful as the vetting of any officer. A painted and gilded cradle, a nursery with its own staff. The lady will lie in for her month in state, receiving visitors like the head of a small friendly government. The christening will be a public event, with godparents of rank, and the feast after it will feed half the district. And you will walk home the next day with more coin in your purse than a year of village births brings you, plus a length of fine cloth pressed on you by the lady's own steward, out of which you will eventually make the best kirtle you'll ever own, the one you'll wear to court sessions and christenings for the rest of your life. But the thing you actually treasure from your grand nights isn't the cloth or the coin. It's the knowledge you carry back down the hill in the dawn light. And it's this: you have now seen your craft at every altitude of your world, from a cotter's one-room cottage to a tapestried tower, and it is one craft. The same sealed warm room, the same circle of women, the same saint on the wall, the same work of the same hands, the same cry at the end. Kings' physicians will never see what you've seen, and neither will kings. Birth is the one country where your whole world lives as equals, and you are one of the few people in it who has traveled that country from end to end. Not bad, you think, as your lane comes into view below you, for an unlettered widow with a willow basket. Not bad at all. Your work has a calendar, and after 30 years, you know its shape the way you know the shape of your own hands. Babies, whatever they may think, do not arrive at random. They arrive in waves that follow the great slow rhythms of village life, the feasts and the fasts, the plowing and the harvest, and a midwife who has watched those waves for 3 decades can very nearly tell you in autumn how busy she'll be in the spring. So let's walk the wheel of your year, season by season, the way you live it. Begin in the deep of winter, because winter is your testing season. Snow on the lanes, ice on the well, nights that fall in mid-afternoon and lean their whole weight against the shutters. Babies come anyway. Babies always come anyway. And so you go out into it, wrapped in every woolen thing you own, your basket under your cloak to keep the flasks from freezing, following a bobbing lantern through blue drifts to a cottage you could find in a blizzard. And here's winter's secret, the one that repays the frozen walk. No birthing chamber is ever cozier than one sealed against a snowstorm. The fire roars, the cottle steams, the wind argues with the thatch and loses, and inside that golden pocket of warmth, the oldest work in the world goes on as if the cold had never been invented. Some of the sweetest births of your life have happened while the snow fell. You walk home from them at dawn through a world made new and white and silent, tired to the bone and strangely young. Then spring and the whole village exhales. Lent gives way to Easter. The plow teams go out. Your garden wakes up demanding attention like a hungry child. Spring in your trade tends toward the busy. Count back 9 months, and you'll find high summer with its long, bright evenings and its festivals, and you permit yourself one dry, private smile about that arithmetic every spring of your life. You're out in the lanes constantly now, mud to the ankle, making your rounds of the newly expecting. The first visits, the first laying on of hands, the first steadying talks with first time mothers whose eyes are full of questions they're afraid to ask. You answer the asked and unasked alike. It's spring. Everything is beginning. A good part of your craft in this season is simply teaching beginnings not to be frightened of themselves. Summer brings the long light, and the church feasts are strung across the calendar like beads, and one above all that belongs to you and yours. In the heart of July falls the day of Saint Margaret, the great patroness of women in childbirth, whose legend every laboring mother in Christendom knows, and whose name is called on in birthing chambers from one end of Europe to the other. On her feast day, you go to church with a particular private devotion, and you light your candles, one in thanks for every safe delivery since her last feast, and certain others, unexplained to anyone, for the names you carry. The other wives see the midwife at her patroness's altar and find it exactly as fitting as a smith honoring Saint Eloi. Every craft has its saint. Yours simply has the busiest one. And then the harvest and the strangest, most head shaking phenomenon of your working year. August and September fill the fields with the whole village, women very much included, and heavily pregnant women very much included, because harvest waits for no one, and every pair of hands matters. You have, more times than you could count, been summoned not to a cottage, but to the edge of a wheat field, because some sturdy young wife worked her rows right up until her pains began. You keep a sharp eye on the great bellied gleaners each autumn, and a private wager with yourself about which of them will cut it finest. The harvest babies arrive into a world that smells of straw and plenty, with the barns filling behind them, and there are worse stars to be born under than abundance. Threaded through all 4 seasons runs the church's calendar, which is your world's true clock, and it shapes your trade in ways a modern listener would never guess. Advent and Lent are seasons of restraint in every sense. Weddings are not held then, and so marriages cluster after Easter and in the bright weeks of early summer, and the first babies of those marriages arrive in their own predictable wave the following year. Feasts, fasts, plowing, shearing, harvest, frost, lay all the wheels one atop another, let them turn together for 30 years while you watch, and the turning becomes something you can feel in advance, like weather in an old knee. The village thinks you have uncanny foresight about busy seasons. You have arithmetic and a very long memory, and beneath the whole turning year, steady as a heartbeat under all that seasonal music, runs the thing that does not change, the knock at the door. It comes in snow and it comes in harvest dust, at Christmas and at Michaelmas, and whatever the season has made of the lanes, you go. 30 winters, 30 springs, 30 of everything, and never once in all of them has the year turned without new names being added to the village by way of your two hands. The wheel turns, the basket waits by the door, and somewhere in the parish, always, the next wave is quietly gathering. Here's something the modern imagination reliably gets wrong about your work. It doesn't end when the baby cries. In some ways, it's only beginning, because your world, this rough, laborious medieval world that we're so often told was brutal about everything, has wrapped the weeks after childbirth in a custom of such deliberate, protected rest that many a modern mother would hear it described and feel a pang of pure envy. It's called the lying in, and presiding over it is the second half of your job. The rule of the lying in is simplicity itself. For about a month after her delivery, a new mother does not work. She keeps to her chamber and her bed, warm and fed and visited, while the women of her world close around her household like a well-drilled crew. Her mother or her sisters take over the cooking. Neighbors appear with bread and pottage and ale. There is an entire quiet custom of feeding a lying-in house. The gossips who attended her birth keep right on attending, in shifts of company and help. Her husband, that large, useless man from the kitchen, discovers he can in fact mind a toddler and stir a pot. And through it all, the new mother's single occupation, sanctioned by the full force of custom, is to lie in the warm heart of her house, nurse her child, and mend. You are the professional at the center of this arrangement, and these visits are some of the best hours of your working life. Every day or two through that first stretch you come by. No midnight urgency now, just you and your basket in the ordinary light of morning. You check the mother over with your knowing hands. Watch for the warning signs your mother drilled into you. Tend her with your salves and your teas and your immense practical repertoire of comfort. You check the baby just as thoroughly, feeding well, gaining flesh, the cord stump healing clean, the swaddling done right. You answer the 50 questions every new mother has, the same 50 you've answered for 30 years, with the same unhurried warmth as if hearing them new. And then, this is the part that makes these visits medicine for you too. You sit a while. You hold the baby by the fire while the mother naps or eats with both hands. There are worse ways to spend a morning than by a warm hearth with a sleeping week-old person on your chest. There may be no better one. The lying in ends the way everything in your world ends and begins, with a ceremony. When her month is done, the new mother dresses in her best, and with her gossips gathered around her once more, she walks to the church for her churching, a short, sweet rite of thanksgiving for her safe delivery with candle and blessing and psalm. Walk with her in that little procession, because you always do, and feel what the ceremony is actually doing. It closes the circle. It marks her publicly and officially as delivered, recovered, restored to the full life of the parish. And like every proper ending in your world, it turns immediately into a feast, back to the house where the tables are laid and the ale is drawn, and the whole float of women who carried her through birth and month now celebrate her return. You are seated in honor naturally. You drink to her, and she, blushing and laughing, drinks to you. Another one safely through, the oldest toast you know. Between all these threads of birth work runs the rest of your practice, because, and here's another thing the modern picture misses, A village midwife is never only a midwife. You are the nearest thing this parish has to a general healer, and the path to your door is worn by every kind of trouble. Children are brought to you with fevers and earaches and mysterious rashes. You dress the wounds of harvest accidents. You send your knitbone salve around the village until the pot comes back scraped shining. The old shepherd swears only your Betony eases his head. Half your errands blur the line between physic and neighborliness, sitting with the sick, judging when a fever is worth worrying over, knowing when a trouble is beyond you, and saying so plainly, because knowing your limits is a skill you rank above most of your remedies. In your world, these healing women have always existed in every village, tending their neighbors with herbs and experience and good sense. You are simply the best of them, with a sworn office besides. So this is what the days between are made of, and step back now and look at the whole fabric of them. A professional web of care, run by women, covering this village from the first flutter of a pregnancy through birth, through the guarded month, to the churching feast, with the midwife moving along every thread of it. Nobody in your world would call it a system. Nobody designed it. It has no name, no records, no budget. It's simply what the wives have always done, the way the swallows have always come in spring. But watch it work for 30 years, as you have. Watch the meals appear, and the gossips organize themselves, and the mothers rest, and mend, and return. And you know it for what it is, one of the quiet masterpieces of the medieval village, invisible to history precisely because it worked too smoothly to leave a mark. Tonight, somewhere in the parish, it's working still. The miller's wife is 3 days into her lying in, warm in her chamber, with her daughter at her breast, her mother downstairs at the pots, a neighbor's loaf on the table. Tomorrow morning you'll walk over with your basket and sit with them a while in the ordinary light. It's the gentlest part of the whole long story, these days between. Even the telling of it slows the breath. Time, which you have measured out for so long in other people's beginnings, has been working on you too. You feel it in the knee that forecasts rain, in the lantern-lit lanes that seem longer than they used to, in the way you now sit on a stool for the early hours of a labor where once you'd have stood all night without noticing. You are the oldest woman in most rooms you enter these days, and in the birthing chamber you're something more than that. You are the oldest hands, the deepest memory, the last living link to midwives the village now knows only as names on gravestones. Your mother caught the grandmothers of the girls you now deliver. Sit with that a moment, as you often do. 3 generations have entered this world down a single chain of women, and you are its current final link, which is exactly why, 2 years ago, you did the thing your mother did before you. You chose your successor. Her name is Alice, and she's your brother's granddaughter, a broad-shouldered, level-eyed young woman of 22 who reminds you so much of yourself at that age that watching her is like being haunted, pleasantly, by your own ghost. You'd had your eye on her for years before you said a word. You watched how she was with her younger siblings, how she didn't flinch at slaughtering time, how she asked questions until she understood and then stopped asking. A midwife needs warm hands and a cool head, your mother used to say, and most people are born with at most one of them. Alice, you judged, he's had both. So one autumn evening, you asked her to walk with you, and by the time you'd circled the churchyard twice, the chain had its next link. Now she's beside you at every birth, moving through the same apprenticeship you moved through under your mother's eye, years of it, stage by stage, water and fire first, then the linens, then holding the mothers, then at last beginning to lend her own young hands to the work under the close supervision of your old ones. She's in the middle stages now, and she's good, better than you were at her age, you suspect, though you'd sooner eat your basket than tell her so this early. Praise, in your teaching method, as in your mother's, is administered like strong medicine, rarely in small doses, at exactly the right moment. The night after her first difficult birth went well, you told her, walking home in the dawn, that your mother would have liked the way she kept her voice steady. She was quiet for a long time. You both understood that this was, by the standards of the Guild of Two you belonged to, a knighthood. What you're really teaching her, underneath the herbs and the knots and the maneuvers, is the same thing your mother was really teaching you: judgment, when to act and when to wait, what's ordinary and what's a cracked bell, how to hold a whole room steady with your face. And this is the strange, humbling discovery of your old age. Teaching it is far harder than doing it. Your hands know things that skip your tongue entirely. 100 times you've caught yourself saying, "Watch," because there are no words, only a lifetime, and Alice watches, hawk-eyed, the way you once watched, and the wordless knowledge crosses from your hands to her eyes to her hands by the same invisible ferry it has always traveled. This is how it has been passed down since before anyone can say, not through books, through watching, in warm, sealed rooms, in the middle of the night for years. She'll be ready when the time comes, properly ready, sworn and vouched for as you were, with you standing witness to her character before God as your mother stood for you. The village has already begun, in its unhurried way, to weave her in. Mothers ask after young Alice now, wanting her at their births alongside you, and the older wives have started giving her the nod in the lane that they gave you 30 years ago. Watching that welcome extend to her, door by door, is one of the deep satisfactions of your late life. You are watching your own long ago self walk into the village's trust, and this time you get to see it from the outside, the way your mother must have seen you and never said. And so you find yourself, on quiet evenings like this one, doing an old woman's accounting. Not the eggs and pennies kind, the other ledger. Somewhere past 200 souls, caught first by your hands. You truly did lose exact count years ago, and you've decided you like it that way, the number softening into something more like a landscape than a figure. The blacksmith and the baker's wife, and the reeve's 3 sons, and the girl who sings like clear water, and now the miller's new daughter, 3 days old, the latest name in a book no one keeps. Every one of them out there tonight under the village thatch, breathing. That's the estate you'll leave. No lands, no title, a snug cottage and 2 good blankets, and a parish full of people who all began the same way, in firelight in your 2 hands, in the oldest room there is. The chain holds, your mother to you, you to Alice, Alice someday to a girl not yet born, one you might even deliver yet, if the knees hold out. You find you're smiling, alone in your cottage, at the thought of it. Then you bank the fire the way you have 10,000 times, and let the evening come. Evening now, and the day is folding itself away. You've had your supper, good pottage, bread, a slice of a grateful family's cheese, and you've banked the fire down to its soft red heart. And now you do the thing you do on gentle nights like this one. You carry your stool to the doorway of your cottage and sit a while in the last of the light, watching your village put itself to bed. The light goes in stages, and you know every one of them. First, the gold drains out of the church tower, top to bottom, like a cup slowly emptied. Then the swallows hand the sky over to the bats, that silent changing of the guard that no one ever quite sees happen. The lanes empty, doors close, one by one, each with its own voice. You could name every household in the village by the sound of its door. Wood smoke settles into the low air, sweet and blue. Somewhere a mother calls a last child in from the green, and the child comes running, small feet on packed earth, the very last hurry of the whole day. The village quiets the way a body quiets, not all at once, in slow, sinking layers. The oxen first, then the hens, then the dogs, each one settling deeper. Lights go out cottage by cottage, warm cracks of firelight around the shutters, thinning to darkness, until the only lit seams left are the ones you can name. The alewife, who keeps late hours, the mill, where a new family is learning its new shape. From the church tower, the bell rings the last office of the day, slow and even, the sound rolling out over the thatch like a blessing being pulled up to everyone's chin. You cross yourself out of 60 years of habit, comfortable as breathing. And above it all, the stars come on, thick and close and utterly silent, the great white river of them running right over your roof, over the church, over the sleeping fields. The same stars, you sometimes think, that stood over every single birth you ever attended, keeping their calm watch above the sealed golden rooms. You've walked beneath them at every hour of the night, in every season, for 30 years, and they have escorted you home from every kind of night there is, old colleagues by now. You nod to them, they glitter on, unhurried the way they do. Sitting there in the doorway, warm in your shawl, you let the day's thoughts come and go like slow moths. The miller's daughter, 3 days old, asleep on her mother's chest behind that lit seam of shutter down the lane. Alice, who tied a cord knot today so exactly like your mother's knot that your breath caught. The parade of small memories a long life keeps handing you, unasked in the evenings, christening mornings, snowfall dawns, 200 first cries. You hold each one a moment and set it gently down. There's no need to keep hold of anything, this hour of the night. Everything you love is either asleep already or on its way there. That's the last quiet gift of this life you've lived tonight, and maybe it's the one to carry back with you toward your own pillow. The knowledge, worn smooth as a doorstep by daily use, that a village can be held, that the whole warm, breathing parish of them, mothers and babies, millers and shepherds, the choir girl and the blacksmith, and every soul you ever lifted into the light, can be gathered in under the same dark sky and kept the way embers are kept, banked and glowing till morning. Someone has always done the keeping. Tonight, one more time, it was you. The cold begins to find your ankles, the way it does, and you rise, knee complaining on schedule, and carry your stool inside and slide the bolt and bank what needs banking. Your bed receives you like an old friend. Straw and sweet woodruff, 2 proud woolen blankets, the fire's red heart breathing softly across the room. The basket waits by the door, packed and patient. If the knock comes tonight, it comes, and you will rise and go as you always have. But it isn't coming tonight. Tonight, the whole parish is delivered, safe, and sleeping. So let yourself sink now, you, listener, wherever you are, in whatever bed, in whatever century. Let the village dissolve gently around you, the stars first, then the thatch, then the soft red fire, growing dimmer and warmer and farther away. You can leave it all exactly as it is. The midwife is sleeping. The baby at the mill is sleeping. The whole medieval world is sleeping, and it doesn't need you anymore tonight, and nothing does. Let your breath go long and slow, the way she taught the mothers, in and out. Each one is one less. There's nowhere to be. There's nothing to hold, just the warm dark and the old stars keeping watch, and sleep coming up the lane toward you now, softly on small feet, like the last child called home. If you're still with me, drift a moment longer. Tonight you lived a life that history nearly forgot to write down. Not a queen, not a saint, just a widow with a willow basket and the most trusted hands in her village. She kept no records and left no name, and yet everyone you met in that village, every soul under that thatch, arrived through hands like hers. Some of your own ancestors did too, in some village somewhere, on some firelit night no one wrote down. She was real. There were thousands of her, and now you've been one of them for a night. If this journey helped you rest, subscribe so I can meet you here again tomorrow night. There are so many more forgotten lives for us to fall asleep inside, and if you've already drifted off, that's even better. That was always the plan. The fire is banked. The basket waits by the door. The stars are keeping watch. Rest easy. Sleep well. This is Drowsy History.